I did this series of podcasts about this book called The Psychology of Military Incompetence. And they have these authoritarian people, and when they look at the military, they think, they're like,
you get that in the police too.
Yep, you get it in the police, you get it in law enforcement. You get these people that have that authoritarian mindset. They see what it looks like from the outside, and they think, oh, this is gonna be awesome. This is where I belong.
Yeah.
And so they go and everyone's gonna wear a uniform. They're gonna have to call me sir. They're gonna have to obey what I say. It's like a dream for them.
Yeah.
And in non-combat situations, those people can perform pretty well because we're on the parade field. I need everyone in the same uniform. I'm gonna inspect your barracks rooms. I'm going to make sure that you follow my orders as soon as they're given. That's like a beautiful place for that authoritarian mindset, is a non-combat situation. But you put those people in combat, and now all of a sudden, there's literally no rules anymore. There's a very small number of rules. And now you have to deal with, Jordan, who listened to me when we were on the parade field, but now he's scared to death that he's gonna die and he's not listening to me anymore. Now what do I do? How do I handle
and he
that?
has reason to be scared.
He has reason to be scared. So you would see, and I got to see this a lot inside the military, the people that had the authoritarian mindset, the closed mindset, they had real problems when you put them into combat situations where there's mayhem and chaos and they can no longer control it. And they freak out because of that. It's a real problem.
Well, like you said, I don't think there's a better definition of chaos than warfare. Like, obviously, that's a place where the rules are suspended. So then the question would be, well, what's the best possible mindset to bring to bear on a situation where the rules have been suspended, right? You can certainly see the distribution of responsibility and an appeal to voluntarism is going to be of great utility under those, not least so you don't get shot in the back by your own men.
Yeah. And then the creativity aspect, right? Because all of a sudden there's no rules, or there's very limited amount of rules.
Yeah.
And if we've got to find out a different way to execute these missions that's going to make more sense in this particular environment that we're in, that no book and no training has prepared us for. I got asked a little while ago about, if we were going to war with China, and I was leading, my troops into combat, what would I be thinking about? And I said, the thing I would be focused on, the same thing I'm always focused on, especially going into a combat situation, and that is keeping an open mind. Because I don't know what's gonna happen. The enemy doesn't know what's gonna happen. I don't know exactly how my troops are going to react. I don't even know how I'm gonna react. And if I get a fixed mindset where I'm saying, this is what we're gonna do and this is how it's gonna be, as soon as that combat starts, that you can throw that thing out the window. And now if I have a closed mind, I fall apart. If I have an open mind, I look around and say, okay, I see some adaptations we can make right now. Here's what we need to do. Here's some adjustments we can make. And that's when I ran training, that was the purpose of my training, was to open people's minds, was to put them in situations where if they stuck with a fixed mindset and they didn't open their mind and they didn't see other perspectives, they were gonna fall apart. They're gonna get
So
destroyed.
that other perspective, that's gotta be allied with that willingness to incorporate information from the bottom up, because you're going to get, so that's where the diversity claims of the radical left have some utility, is like, well, in any open-ended situation, you want a genuine diversity of viewpoints because the situation is shifting, and the more options you have in front of you, up to some limited degree, because, time to process all those options also matters. You don't want a uniformity of opinion because you're going to run into this problem that you just described.
Here's a good example. The Iraqi military, right? It's basically a caste system. You have the officers at top, and then you had a bunch of, almost slave labor a little bit.
Yeah.
And the officers would skim money off the paychecks of the soldiers.
Right.
That's how they operated.
Right.
And
there's a loyalty building exercise for you.
Not the best loyalty building exercise at all. And so
the rule is don't rip off armed subordinates? How's that for a rule?
Here's the thing that's interesting. So our chain of command found out that this was happening, and there was a lot of pressure throughout the US military, like, we've got to stop this. These soldiers are getting ripped off. This is terrible. We need to prosecute the officers that are skimming money from the paychecks. So I went and brought my interpreter, and we go talk to these soldiers.
Yeah.
And you say, like, hey, is it true that your boss is skimming money off your paycheck? Like ready to write it down and and they go, well, of course, he's the boss. Of course he's going to take some of the money. I mean, that's sort of what that's totally normal. They weren't angry about it. They were just like, oh yeah, well, he's the boss. He's going to take some money. And then when I get promoted, I'll be able to take money. That's the way their system functions. And it was...
See, I jumped to the wrong conclusion.
That investment, that was my conclusion too, because I was a young enlisted guy. And if my officer would have been skimming my money, I would have been totally against it. But that was a very normal thing. And so I kind of try to back off and say, like, this is the way their culture is. That's the way their culture is. It's different than ours. It's unacceptable.
Were there parameters of skimming?
Yeah, there are. There's parameters of skimming.
Right, so you could take some percent.
Yes. And it's the same thing with the Iraqis. We'd say, hey, we're going on an operation tonight. We've got an operation tonight. Can you bring 30 guys tonight to conduct this operation? And they would tell you 100% of the time, yeah. Yep. And they'd show up with 9, or they'd show up with 6, or they'd show up with 48. And because it's inshallah, right? It's God willing, we'll have 30 people. If that's the way it's supposed to be, that's the way it'll be. And instead of us going, hey, this isn't the way we do it, we had to say, okay, well, how do they operate? What do they think like? How can we incorporate their perspective on things into our culture? And how can we merge these cultures together so that we can communicate with them in an effective way? So we go, oh, okay, cool. How many people do you think you can bring tonight? And they're going to give you a better answer than if you say, can you bring this many? It's a little nuance in the way that you interact with them.
Right.
But if you
that might have even been a politeness norm, because their response to you might have been, well, the polite thing is to tell the person who's asking what they want to hear. Right. And that is different than saying, well, how many people do you think you could bring?
Totally different.
Yeah.
So if I had a fixed mindset and a closed mind, it would have been saying, this is the military. A platoon is 40 guys. You need to bring a platoon tonight. If you don't bring a platoon, the world explodes, right? Nothing's going to work. But the open-minded attitude is like, oh, they think a little bit different than we do. Hey, how many people can you bring? And all of a sudden, okay, you can bring 12. Okay, then we'll bring 18 and we'll have 30. We'll be able to get this thing done. We'll make it happen. But when we have a closed mind, we don't hear other people's perspective. It's actually insane. I've seen people, we have intelligence come in, information come in, and just be like, no, that's just shut it off. As if it doesn't exist. Instead of saying, oh, well, at a minimum, where'd that information come from, right? I might not agree with that information, but we've got someone telling us that there's a machine gun nest in this location. No, that's impossible. I've heard people say those.
People do that in their own marriages all the time.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. So to put your ego in check and say, oh, that person might understand, or this intelligence may come from a place, something that I don't understand or I don't know about. Let me open my mind and at least ask some questions about it. And we're seeing this in the political world right now, right? The divisiveness in the country is like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. Therefore, everything that you say, I don't listen to anything that you say. And that's the way it is. And end of conversation. I don't want to hear anything that you have to say, which is a real problem. Instead of having conversations with people and trying to understand what your perspective is, crazy as it may seem to me, I still have to listen to what you have to say and try and integrate that.
It's especially true when you have to live. I was on Bill Maher's show at one point, and it was me and a bunch of people who were, at least under the current circumstances, more liberal than me, and they were going off on Trump and the MAGA types. And I brought the conversation to a halt by asking them how that attitude, essentially of contempt that they brought to bear on the situation, was going to serve them, given that that was 50% of the population and they're going to have to live with them, right? And so this ARC thing that we put together in London, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, one of the rules that we're attempting to implement, we're afraid that any enterprise that's international visionary, let's say, will have a proclivity to turn into something authoritarian in like no time flat.
You could make a cool movie about that.
Yeah, well,
right?
No kidding.
The ARC goes wild.
Well, no kidding. Absolutely. One of our principles is that any policy that you have to implement by manipulation or force is at minimum suboptimal, right? That you need voluntary buy-in. And that's something like consent of the governed. But I also think that it's more just a counsel of wisdom, because it's a lot easier to lead people where they want to go. And it's really incumbent, it's kind of a definition of leadership, is that you have to find out where people want to go. And you should assume that maybe they have the reasons for the decisions that they made. And then you can help them strategize about how that might be undertaken and what their respective roles might be. It's very useful as well to give, not to give them something that's important to do, but to encourage them to take on something important to do and then to back the hell off so they can do it, right?
No better tool in leadership than giving people ownership of what they're doing. You know, the classic in the military is I don't say, hey, Jordan, here's the mission. Here's the people I want you to take. Here's the weapons I want you to use. Here's the vehicles I want you to bring. Here's how I want you to assault the building.
Yeah.
Here's the time I want you to hit the target. Here's the time I want you to, the route I want you to take to get back here.
Yeah.
And here's what time I want you to do the debrief.
Yeah.
So take ownership of that and go execute. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
What we want to do in a decentralized organization
Yeah.
is say, hey, Jordan, here's the target you got to hit tonight.
Right. Yeah.
Go figure out how you want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're a good leader, then you turn to your team and you say, hey guys, here's the target we got to hit tonight.
How can we do
How do
this?
you think we should do this?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you have ownership over this. And
How do you negotiate agreement on the original target?
well, that's the thing is, if you say to me, hey Jocko, why do you want to hit that target?
Yeah.
I should be able to say, well, we found out that's the node that's been making explosive
Yeah,
devices that's been hitting all of our bases.
Here's
And
our
you go,
prioritization rationale.
you say, cool, got it.
Yeah.
Occasionally, and I can't be afraid of this, occasionally you say, hey Jocko, why are we hitting that target? And I
Yeah.
say, I'm not sure.
Right. That's not good.
That's not good at all. In fact, that's to me, you know what? Let me go find out.
Right. Definitely.
And also occasionally, I might say, well, we want to hit the target because we've been getting bombed and we want that to stop. And this is the node that's been making
Yeah.
these explosives. And you might say to me, hey, the road that you want us to go down to hit this target has had roadside bombs on it every day. And there's no other entry in there. I don't think we should do this.
Mhm.
And then what should I say? I should say, oh, I did not know that.
Right. And then it's up the chain of command.
How can we find another way to prosecute this target?
Uh-huh.
And because I listen to you, now when I come back and say, hey, actually, we did some analysis. We are going to get you some helicopters. You're not going to have to drive down the road. Here's the new tools you have. And you say, great. And so we move forward down the path, not by me dictating to you and not by you protesting and calling me an idiot,
Yeah.
but by us having a relationship and working together to figure out the best solution to the problem. You can never be afraid as a leader to not know the answer, to say like, well, I'm actually not sure about that. Let me find out. People are scared of that. People are scared of when someone on their team raises their hand and says, hey boss, why are we doing this? A lot of times their response is because I told you to.
Yeah, right.
We say that to our kids,
Yeah.
which is a terrible answer even for your kids.
Yeah.
Even for your kids.